Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Insider Insights. First, let's welcome our guest here, Lepiarz, the account director at Craft and Converse. I'm so glad you're here today, Jack.
Thanks so much for having me, Millie. Really looking forward to it.
So, if you can tell us a bit background about what you do first, that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So my current role, I work at Craft and Commerce. We're an advertising agency essentially. So what we do is we create, the creative. So that could be ads, those could be movies, those could be, images, and we place those all on all kinds of different media outlets. So that could be Facebook, Twitter, podcasts, out of home advertising, whatever it is. And really, our focus is social impact organizations. So those are nonprofits as well as advocacy organizations. Before coming to Craft and Commerce, I worked at Johnson & Johnson for almost 10 years. And I worked in our corporate equity group, which is essentially the global marketing arm of Johnson & Johnson, growing and protecting the reputation of the company globally.
Awesome. What are the hard skills and soft skills needed to work in marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, if you're looking to pursue a career in marketing, an MBA is a great way to go. Most people, when they think about marketing, they think about marketing communications, right? And that's what we all see and we experience, whether that be the commercials we see or the advertising we see online. But really being a marketer is about running a business. So there's a big component of that, which are financial skills, which is understanding how are you driving profit and loss for the business, how are you setting objectives, and then something I always talk to students a lot about are understanding what an objective is, and it's a clear goal that you have that has a number on it and has a timeline that you're trying to meet, right? So knowing how to set objectives, knowing how to meet objectives, knowing how to measure how you're going to reach those. So having those kind of skills, I think, are really important from a hard skills perspective. Soft skills, I think this goes beyond marketing, but being able to collaborate and work in a team is really important in any kind of knowledge work job now. Any professional is going to have to work collaboratively. They're going to have to work with people who have very different skills or backgrounds from them, whether those be academic backgrounds or cultural or backgrounds as well. And leadership, I think, is really important as well. And there are a couple different kinds of leadership. Oftentimes, you have people who directly report to you, right? And you have the ability to delegate tasks to them. And you are their manager. But there's also a very, very important part of leadership is leading when you don't necessarily manage people. There are oftentimes you're going to have very large teams that you're a part of, and you're not going to have the ability to be those people's boss, essentially. But you're going to have to bring them along with you, and you're going to have to get them to do what you want without being able to essentially coerce them or force them to do what you
Very Tell us a bit about your path where you are now, how you got into doing marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I began in school. Actually, I got a degree in psychology, and that's because I've always been very interested in the study of persuasion and behavior change. Right? How do you essentially get people to move in the direction that you want? After that, I took a break from school for a little while. I worked, but then I went back and I actually got my degree in communications at Rutgers University, where you and I met, right, through teaching relationship. And that master's in communications that I got took me to Johnson & Johnson through a fellowship program. And I worked there as a fellow for 2 years in their corporate communications group. I managed social media properties for the enterprise, and then that led to further careers or jobs at Johnson & Johnson for a further 6 or 7 years.
Wonderful. It must be very different from working at big companies like Johnson & Johnson and smaller companies. So what's the difference in your opinion, and which do you prefer?
Yeah, there is definitely a big difference, and there are pros and cons to each. One of the things that when you work at a big company like Johnson & Johnson, and Johnson & Johnson is a very big company. It's a Fortune 30 company. Most people think of it as like the baby shampoo company, but it's like the world's fifth largest pharmaceutical company. It's the world's largest medical device company. So 150,000 people work at that company, right? Really, really big. When you're working at a place like that, it takes a long time often to get decisions made because there are many, many layers of people who have to sign off on those decisions. and that can be a little bit frustrating sometimes. So that's why I like working at a smaller company, which I do now, because you can move much more quickly, you can make decisions more quickly, you can adjust and be a little more agile. But one of the pros of working for a big company like Johnson & Johnson is you have a lot of resources at your disposal, right? So those can be budgets, those can be agencies that you work with. So there are pros and cons to both, but I'd say at this point in my career, I very much like the entrepreneurial, more agile nature of working for a smaller company.
Yeah, efficiency is everything from developers.
Yes, got to move quick and smart, but fast.
How do you think students should best prepare for a marketing job interview? How do students answer those previous questions and challenge questions? How they got into be interested in marketing questions?
Yeah, and that's a great question. One of my favorite things to do with mentees or with students is help them prepare for interviews. So I'd say the number one best thing that you can do when you're preparing for an interview is to do a trial or a mock interview with someone or with multiple people before you go in the room and do it for real the first time. If you're giving a presentation, no matter what you're doing, if it's very important, you need to rehearse it. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that you find a mentor, you find a friend, and you do a trial interview with them, and do it a couple times because you're going to get more comfortable with them. Look up what they call behavioral interview questions. If you're going to a place and if they're smart and if it's a big company, they're probably going to ask you questions where they're going to say, tell me about a specific time when X, Y, or Z happened. Like tell me a specific time when there was someone on your team who you had a disagreement with. How did you manage that, right? Look up those behavioral interview questions and think about answers for those, and then probably have someone ask you those questions in a mock interview. Also, definitely do your research. The last thing that you want to do is go into an interview and ask a question about something that you could have found online. That just shows that you're not super serious about the job. There are definitely other people who are interviewing who spend a lot of time researching the company and you know a lot about it. Use that information. Make sure that you allude to that information and mention it in the interview. And I would say the last thing is 100% of the time, in my experience, at the end of the interview, they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? Make sure that you have questions. If you don't, you probably are not going to get that job. Again, it shows that you're not super serious about it and you haven't thought about it in depth. 2 questions that are very easy that can work for any interview, and I've always seen have gotten a positive response, are what is most challenging about this job? And then what do you think is going to make this, whoever gets this role, what will be, a very successful person in this role? What will they do? Or we could say a more folksy way, what does a home run look like for this job, in 3 to 6 months?
Right. What kind of like 3 things you think job seekers should think about before the big day?
In terms of the interview day? So top 3 things to think about. So I would say, 1, prepare for the interview, right? So do those trial interviews. Make sure that you do a lot of research, right? Prepare your questions for the interviewer. I would say get your dress ready. You don't want to do it the day of, right? So make sure that you have an outfit. And I think the key, in terms of how you're going to dress for your interview is you need to feel comfortable in it, right? So it should be something that makes you feel very confident and powerful, right? And then I would say 3 is, before you go into the interview, there's a couple of exercises you can do to kind of ground yourself and make yourself feel a little more calm, right? It's very natural to feel nervous before you do anything important. So this is anyone who's familiar with the Navy SEALs, or these are the U.S. Special Forces, right? These people are doing very, very high risk, dangerous stuff, right? Even they get nervous. So advice from a Navy SEAL on how he prepares for big missions is he just does kind of breath control. So right before he goes into something, breathe in as deep as you can, hold it for a few seconds, and then let it out until it's completely gone. And just do that for a couple of minutes. And what that's going to do, it's going to You increase your blood oxygen level, which is going to reduce your stress level. It's going to increase the oxygen available to your brain so you can think and so you can be relaxed. And then also something I like to tell folks, students is, the feeling of excitement and the feeling of being nervous or scared are actually pretty much the same thing. Think about it. When you're excited to do something, your blood pumps and you get butterflies in your stomach and you have this nervous energy. That's the same, that excitement feeling is the same feeling that you get when you're nervous. So really, if you're nervous before an interview, it's just because you're excited. It's because you're doing something big and important, and that's great. So just embrace that feeling and look at it as a positive feeling, not a negative feeling.
That's great advice. So can you talk a little bit about your experience of teaching students?
Absolutely. So I'll say, just like working with you, one of the best students I ever had, no joke. But it is probably my favorite thing to do in the world. I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction and gratification out of, imparting knowledge on people, helping them learn, helping them develop, and really helping people kind of achieve their full potential. We all have a tremendous amount of potential within us to achieve whatever our kind of goal or our dream is. And it's very satisfying for me when I can take, all the lessons that I've learned and pass those along to people so they can then, use that one to be successful. And my hope is then they will also take those lessons and pass them on to someone else, whether that be as a teacher, as a mentor, as a boss, right? We can all do our part to help the next person who comes along the line be successful.
Yeah, and college students tend to be very confused about their future and what they really want to do. So, yeah, teachers can really help us with that.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll tell you, it is not easy. If you feel unsure about what you want to do or how to get there, you are not alone. The vast majority of the people in the world have that same experience. There are a few people who know exactly what they want and know exactly how they're going to get there. In my life, that hasn't been the case for me, and I think for most people, they don't know exactly. So that's okay. Don't worry about it. It can be a little bit stressful, but life will take you to where it's meant to be, one way or the other. One thing I will say is when you're thinking about your future career or the job that you want or the job that you're going to have, really trust your gut, trust how you truly feel about something. There can often be a lot of pressure to go down certain career paths or do certain things. You will know deep down whether or not this is the right thing for you, and listen to that feeling. It's not always an easy road to get to the place that you want to be. In fact, most things in life that are really good do not come easy. But if you really, I think, are deliberate and you work hard, you're going to get to where you're meant to be.
Excellent. You talk a little bit about your experience of training new employees and interns.
Yeah, absolutely. So it has always been a fantastic experience for me. I found all of the mentees and interns to be extremely smart, really hardworking, and just filled with really good ideas. They always ask a lot of questions. Something I would say for anyone who wants to be a marketer, one of the most important skills you can have is to ask really hard questions, because marketers are always having to look for places their plan could fail, right? So asking questions is key, and I've always found the Ivy Gate mentees and interns to be really great in that regard. And it's just a lot of fun. Really what we do is hands-on, and the way that I like to work with the students is we teach the fundamental skills of marketing and marketing communications, but we do it by coming up with a real plan for a company which relates to something that the mentee is passionate about. Some of the mentees even had real businesses, and we helped develop marketing plans for those businesses, and that made it even more enjoyable.
My last question would be, can you give some actionable advice to students in the age range from 18 to 25 that you think should know?
Yeah. So, academics are very important, of course, right? So you got to get your degree. Grades are important, right? And you got to make sure that you're getting the kind of right degree path. What is just as important, though, is having real world experience. If you graduate with just a degree and without any internships or jobs probably in your field, it makes it much more difficult to find a job after graduation. And so look for opportunities to work in your field, even if it's not at an official company. If you want to get into marketing, run a club and do marketing for that club, right? You want to make sure that you're doing work that you can take into those interviews, right? And then also, just as important, and one reason working is so important is networking is super, super important. I've had many jobs in my life. When I was in high school, I was a janitor. I worked as a waiter. I've done all kinds of things, all the way to working, with the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. Every job I have ever had in my life, from a janitor to Johnson & Johnson, there was some sort of personal relationship that was involved in me getting that job. Doesn't mean that I was not qualified. It didn't mean that I didn't have to interview well. Doesn't mean that I didn't work hard to get that job. But there are dozens or hundreds of other people who are also working just as hard and also just as qualified for those roles. It's a very competitive job market. So building your network is incredibly important and critical to success professionally.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks so much for being here today.
Of course, really enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching this episode of the Insights. We will see you next time.